people will pay for your experience and for your story. And that's why I'm all for the sole proprietor, because if you attach your story, your experience to your business and your model, I think you're unstoppable.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously. You know, some people embody courage so effortlessly, it seems like they're living examples of what's possible, and they pave the way for the rest of us.
Today's guest, Tony Morrison, no, not the author, is just such a trailblazer.
Tony is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning producer, writer, media consultant, and senior comms director at GLAAD, the leading LGBTQ media advocacy organization. Formerly at Good Morning America of ABC, he championed LGBTQ storytelling and founded ABC News' first LGBTQ employee group.
A powerful advocate, Tony shares his journey with HIV as the host of Truth Be Told on Plus Life Media, inspiring audiences weekly with stories of resilience and authenticity. We encourage you to pay particular attention to Tony's interview, where he demonstrates the courage, both personally and professionally, to have those hard conversations that few of us want to have, whether it's around his personal finances or his health.
So let's chat with Tony. So Tony, welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
Hi, guys.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah,
Definitely.
exciting.
So we're going to start off with a topic that is very heavy, especially this time of the year.
And near and dear to our hearts, coming from the backstory.
That's credit card debt.
Whoop.
So for a lot of people, there's a lot of stigma around credit card debt.
Totally.
And I think that a lot of us feel a lot of pressure because we feel like we've made some mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's good to talk about our mistakes. So sounds like you maybe have a little bit to share on that.
This is a therapy
story.
session I need. Top of the year. My MXs, plural, are burning through my pants right now. But I will preface this with I am completely a non-literate gay in the financial space. I went to business school, failed finance 3 times, begged the business school dean to let me go. It's one of those things. But yeah, I grew up really just not having a lot of financial literacy. And I grew up sort of really fast at the same time. You know, I had to take care of a sick parent. My parents divorced. My parents will kill me when I share this, but at a certain point, like middle school and high school, they started just giving me the child support checks, and it was just $50 a month. So that was my intro. Imagine like a kid getting a child support check. It's $50, and I'm divvying it up between like a piggy bank, savings, and lunch money, you know? So that was sort of my foray into that space. I put myself through college, mostly on scholarships from writing and being in jazz band once upon a time, you know, the arts, you know? But yeah, once I got my hands on my first credit cards, it was like I had access to something. And I started putting tuition on there and graduation parties and buses, and it all started with the American Eagle Visa with a $2,500 limit. And I was like,
store cards, yeah.
king of the world. I was like, what do you mean I can spend outside of the store? So that was my first experience, was the store credit card.
Yeah. So what was it about? It sounds like early on, like you got this $50 allowance, so to speak, and some of it was going into savings.
Yeah.
And some of it you were spending on lunch money. So it kind of sounded like you were somewhat fiscally prudent. What was it about the credit card that changed your thinking?
For me, and this is still my experience now that I'm trying to separate myself from, definitely because of life experiences and learnings, but it was the idea that I could pay it off with eventual income, this imaginary account or money soon to come in.
Yeah.
But then I was applying multiple expenses to the same line of said income. Right. And I just kept digging into that hole, and it was really difficult to climb out by the time I moved to New York City.
Sure.
It's interesting you bring that up, because actually economists do measure the mood in for the American consumer and credit card debt with the idea that they will be able to eventually pay off that
100%.
credit card debt. And I think it's kind of a fallacy that we don't necessarily, we become too long-sighted rather than short-sighted of when it is that we will actually be able to pay that off.
And to that point, there was never, talking out loud about it with you guys, there was never a plan to pay back any of that debt. It was just a idea of that lump sum coming in to cover a total expense versus making a plan for that expense. And for me, it wasn't just like going out on a shopping spree. It was like, oh, well, yeah, I want to go on this vacation or trip with this group of friends, or we'll go out for a nice dinner or whatever. But there was never a plan to cover and
Just
pay
seemed like
back.
an endless supply of money.
Totally.
Yeah. So when you were actually getting out of debt,
Yeah.
you had somewhat of a plan. You kind of took a little bit of a deviation that a lot of people might not have necessarily taken at that particular juncture. Am I sharing that?
Yeah, I mean, so I got into photography when I was in college. I grew up in Florida outside of Orlando, so my first real job was at Disney World. I was at 17.
Not a bad first job.
It's not terrible, but I was the PhotoPass photographer, in my fishnet vest and smile, say Mickey. And it was a great first job, you guys. It was wonderful. And obviously working for Disney, which followed me later in life, working for Disney media companies. But I learned how to really play in the photography space professionally when I was in college, and I ended up starting my own business because I was like, oh, I can turn a passion and fun into money. I can monetize this, shooting friends' weddings or shooting for the dean's office, school paper, and that just evolved after college, going back to Disney, shooting like Disney weddings, and then getting into the fashion space. Ended up moving to New York City. For Fashion Week, I was like, I went with a photographer friend of mine. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a Vogue photographer, moved to New York, and then realized after I moved to New York that Fashion Week was only 2 weeks out of the year. So again,
off of 2 weeks.
I'm just like I go where the wind takes me, and sometimes I'm a little ahead of said winds. But no, I evolved the photography and creative space into a business, and it became viable. Again, this is like, oh, I can turn this passion into fun and monetize it. But really starting a business for me was born out of necessity.
Yeah.
Because I needed to get out of debt. I needed to increase my rates, find my value and worth in that space. But also needed to keep the passion of it as well at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So most people, including myself, when we have credit card debt, it almost becomes the headlights, and we're the deer and the headlights are staring us right in the face and we freeze. What was going on in your head that said, I'm not going to freeze, I'm actually going to start a business? Because most people don't say, I've got credit card debt, I'm going to go start a business.
Totally. Well, this is two-pronged because I realized after raising my rates, people were meeting me at those rates. I guess I was doing something right, I guess the product was that good and in some regard. So I was like, okay, I'm shooting like $5,000-$10,000 valued weddings. I'm netting in money in a great, amazing new way. I'm in business for myself, but I was still outpaced by the credit card debt. And after moving in to New York City, of course, like that doesn't help on the rent and expenses and all. This is way back when I was like 22, 23, but I did end up deciding to do a debt consolidation program because what was on my credit cards were like tuition, books, like stuff from college and my past life. I was, again, 22, 23. I bit that bullet and it was fine. But I knew then, I was like, I cannot be in this situation again.
Right.
And I cannot feel this restricted in my life ever again. So for me, that was the shock of that experience of like, this cannot happen again.
Yeah.
And I think that's my North Star today of when I start to overspend or when I do have MX's plural, I remember that time and that promise I made to myself of like, this cannot happen again.
So what advice, since you are a business owner yourself, what advice would you have for other aspiring business owners?
So this is a hot take, but I feel like not every company or venture has to scale to a corporation. I'm here for the sole proprietor. If you're in business for yourself, especially for creatives out there, and scaling can mean different things. You're scaling your image, you're scaling your audience, your platform. Find what that scale is for you and stay in that space and evolve. So I work in media. I'm a storyteller, a writer. I have this huge belief that your story is your currency. Your experience is your currency. And to start there. So that's my number one tip.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're kind of contrary to a lot of the hustle culture where it's like, try to grow the business as fast as possible.
And having lived that hustle culture and freelance life, essentially, I know that grit and drive. So when I do find myself in a little bit more debt that I didn't intend to be in, or feeling that uncomfortability that I had faced before, I'm like, okay, what can I dial back? What can I dial in on the creative and hustle side to kind of make up for that gap?
Thank you for that, Tony. Please hold that thought. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. So, Tony, you have had quite the career. Let's see here. You have worked for Good Morning America, CNN, ABC, Disney. You produced and created your own Plus Life Media web series called Truth Be Told. You have highlighted individuals in the LGBT community who have HIV. And you also have recently been named an Out 100 2024 recipient. Congrats. Yeah, I know. I know. Wow. Look at that. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
So let's go back to another important point in your life, 2021, where you, in a sense, came out about something specific. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Totally. And thank you for that runway, for that question as well. But I was diagnosed with HIV in 2021. This was, again, in my early 20s. I had just moved to the city, and 3 months after I moved to the city, a group of friends of mine wanted to go get tested together, and I'm just like, that doesn't feel fun, And sexual health also, like financial literacy, was not top of mind for me growing up. And I did go get tested myself, and didn't find out I was HIV positive. And it was, getting diagnosed with HIV is as terrifying as it sounds. That will never change. Right. But it really pushed me to depend on myself. And I think there's a lot of relational aspects with that, from how I lived personally and in my professional career, and how I treated my finances. Because for me, it was, I had always had myself to push through. Again, putting myself through college, etc. I had always had myself to rely on. And today, with one pill a day, on U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, my HIV status is the most managed thing in my life.
Yeah.
I have a more difficult time getting a text back than managing my status. But that was such a big part of me that really propelled multiple layers of my life in my early 20s, and was a big factor in getting the debt consolidation deal done, because I needed a hard reset across all levels of my life.
Gotcha.
Interesting. It's a difficult thing to tell the truth about yourself and to come out about various aspects of your life. Did you ever worry that doing that would have an impact on your career then? And what about today?
I think in the early phases, I didn't share my HIV status with anyone around me, even my closest friends, for 3 or 4 days. So that was really because of all that society had whispered about people like myself with an HIV status. This is way back in 2013. But what I found out was people wanted to hear more about the story and experience. And what was interesting for me is a lot of non-LGBTQ people were reaching out to me, thanking me for my story. But what I found was people wanted more. People wanted more story and experience. And I, in turn, wanted to hear the same from others. Because I was like, if people are impacted in this way from my story, surely there's more out there. So that became the basis of my storytelling and compassionate storytelling. I like to use that term in media. And now using that space, evolving and growing my creative space, and using that hustle culture and drive within myself to go beyond photography. Like, what's the next step here? How am I evolving and growing my story? And not like just monetizing it, but also evolving my worth and being able to build a business around my story, which is my currency.
What words of encouragement could you give to those folks who are maybe going through that now?
All the tools that you have, I'm going to take you to church right now, you guys. All the tools you have are already within yourself.
Yeah.
And there's so much misinformation in general out there, but around HIV and wellness and sexual health, the answers and the scientific discovery, you could say, has been around for decades. It's just not talked about. So to truncate this thought, my advice would be just to talk about it.
Yeah.
And to first talk about it with people you love and trust.
Yeah.
Love that.
My dad used to use the phrase, and I don't know if this is something that he co-opted from someone else, probably. The truth belongs to those who deserve it, right?
Oof, I love that.
Are there any pieces of information that you would like people to know about being HIV positive?
Even in the first days and weeks finding out my status, looking at the media landscape alone, there were no representations of people living with HIV. And any representations that did exist were around death and dying and horror and disease. And there is still a lot of that. I just wrote an op-ed for Out Magazine talking about respectfully, yes, we need to know that all happened. Like, we get it.
Yeah.
I am tired of the tropes of death and dying. Like, where are just the single script line of PrEP, or I'm going on vacation and I need my HIV meds? You know, there's various ways we can weave in relevant storytelling around stories like myself that does not involve death, dying, and disease. So that's where I am right now. And as the media maker, thought leader, which I never thought I would be able to say in this space, but I think that dovetails into, I think I used the word monetize your experience, which is strike that, that word string. But I'm finding out that people will pay for your experience and for your story. And that's why I'm all for the sole proprietor, because if you attach your story, your experience to your business and your model, I think you're unstoppable, because your story is the one thing that no one can take from you.
This being a money show, did you make any changes to your money management strategy to protect yourself in case there was a drop in clients or a drop in income, loss of a job?
Yeah, I did the whole LLC thing. So I think that for me was to protect me and my finances and liabilities, simply because I was discovering that my client base started to grow out of my own circles and networks. So I needed that protection and evolution for myself. And I think the most challenging thing for creative entrepreneurs like myself is paying yourself instead of putting all of like a check you get from a gig or a client into one pot or one bucket, or pay off one debt or a credit card. That's been the most challenging thing for me, is having that discipline, developing that discipline to, you pay yourself this much and this goes here. So divvying up where funds go has been the most challenging for me, but we're learning. And it's been fun. As I twitch.
Yeah, life is a learning process, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to change subject just a little bit. You are today the communications director for GLAAD.
Yeah.
And GLAAD does a lot of work for the LGBT community, especially in the media space. And what we see going on right now with the community is that there's a lot of fear based on DE&I efforts and various programs being pulled out from companies or being cut back. What do you think the future is for the community right now when you see that happening?
Yeah, to be perfectly realistic, it's going to be really challenging. And I share this from the context and background of working in a newsroom full time and being out with journalists all the time. But we have to modify our language a little bit. And we have to look at what the headlines actually are. You can have a great story. You can have a great beat. But what's actually the headline is, I think, what matters. So when we're writing stories about, we'll just say DI and the attacks on corporate DI programs, we're not really talking about the vast amount of companies who are really sticking to their mission and their values and prioritizing their workforce and their people. So again, to truncate, things are going to get messy. Things are going to be difficult. But we as a community have done this before. We just have to evolve and grow with this experience and do it together. I think across the national queer organizations, we're as unified as ever. And we're speaking every single day together. There's a coordinated effort to get our community through this and to fight policies that are anti-LGBTQ. And we're going to get through this.
Yeah, definitely. So one final question for you. We are asking this of most of our guests here, and that is this idea around personal finances. We lack a lot of experience and verbiage around that in the community. What is one piece of advice when it comes to money, whether it's business or personal finance, that you would give to the queer community?
Oh my gosh. Ask about it and speak on it. I'm
just gonna.
You don't think it's rude to talk about money, apparently.
No. Oh my gosh. I mean, the work you two are doing with a podcast and space like this is monumental because this is a space that didn't exist before, and to have these conversations. And you started this conversation being like, I have to ask you this question. It's about credit card debt. You're going to hate it. It's uncomfortable. But look at the conversation we've had now. And I think that like a lot of things in the queer space or in the taboo conversational space, we just don't talk about it. And to know that I didn't know about like a high yield savings account until like 3 years ago is crazy, you guys. It was attached to the Apple Card, but we'll talk about that in a different podcast.
Comes with a nice watch.
Yes. But speak on it and talk about it.
Yeah.
Ask your friends. Did you hear about this? Can you go to this place with me and find a friend, talk about it, speak on it.
Yeah, that is the whole mission of everything we've done for the last decade. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank
you
guys.
for coming on the show.
I'm excited. Oh my gosh.
Wow, what a powerful storyteller our Tony Morrison is. It's almost as if he was the understudy for the author, Tony Morrison.
Right. I think it's really important to remember how he talks about us telling our stories, because our stories are our currency. He also encourages us to make sure that we have those difficult conversations, especially around money and our sexual health.
Because if we don't have those difficult conversations, especially around topics like our health and our finances, it's hard to know what all the resources are that are out there that can help us with those critical areas of our lives.
So thank you for joining us for another episode of Living Not So Fabulously. Remember to join us every Wednesday at noon Eastern on yahoofinance.com, YouTube, or wherever you catch your favorite podcasts.
Like, subscribe, and set those notifications. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.